Well, I'm joined now by the Times' London editor, Andy Silvester. Welcome to the show, Andy.
Morning, Ed.
The Police Federation, let's start with this. The Police Federation is threatening to take the government to court to stop two of the killers of PC Andrew Harper being released from prison early. The police officer was killed in 2019 when responding to a quad bike theft in Berkshire. Under the government's early release scheme, the two men convicted of manslaughter over his death could be set free halfway through their 13-year sentences. Speaking to Kate McCann and Stig Abel on Times Radio Breakfast, the chair of the Thames Valley Police Federation, Eileen O'Connor, said she is concerned about the consequences.
I feel sick to my stomach, if I'm really honest with you, and I've had a gut-wrenching feeling in my stomach for the past couple of weeks about this, and it doesn't go away. And arguably, I would say that many of my members across Thames Valley also have that gut-wrenching feeling at the prospect of these two killers being released in the space of weeks potentially, and they pose a risk across Thames Valley as far as I'm concerned.
That was Eileen O'Connor speaking to Times Radio Breakfast, and of course you can join them every day from 6 a.m. I mean, Andy, this is a big political problem for Andy Burnham and for the government, because of course the review on early release started with the furore over PC Harper's killers potentially being released. They've conducted the review, they've made some changes, but PC Harper's killers are still being released.
Yeah, welcome to the big league, Andy Burnham. This is what happens when you're in number 10 Downing Street. You have to make unpopular decisions, and there are competing narratives, and you occasionally get yourself in trouble. It is only a few days ago that there were stories on the front of the newspapers that Andy Burnham was putting to bed one of Keir Starmer's least favourite policies, the early release scheme, which, of course, saw people coming out of jail early and being, I think it's fair to say, pretty chirpy about it. We all remember those pictures of prisoners coming out when earlier than they'd expected to be, smiling for photographers, created a right furor, understandably annoyed people. Andy Burnham made an announcement, there's a review, great, we're moving forward. And then falling through the gaps, because we don't have enough space in our prisons, are the killers of PC Harper. And you can imagine the public reaction. I have no doubt that over the next sort of 48 hours, we will see some movement from number 10, some words from the Justice Department that suggest that they will not, in fact, be leaving when they might be. But you can't run government on exceptions for front pages, and it will be interesting to see how they take this forward.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think there will be some movement. I think it's too politically toxic for them. And the other thought that occurred to me is, I accept that Andy Burnham is a great communicator, but, on the day that we're all talking about this, he's giving a podcast interview on how to fail, talking about this and that. He's going on holiday. I don't begrudge him a holiday, but it's not a good look, the kind of softly, touchy-feely Prime Minister. And as you say, these hard policies, welcome to the big league, Andy Burnham.
No, as honeymoons go, this one has been a fairly short one. He is still, Andy Burnham is still popular, but when you look at the front of The Sun today, our sister paper, it is "We'll see you in court, PM." And there are questions, I think, and they will gather over the summer. If Andy Burnham does not present a big plan, if he doesn't, and it looks like he doesn't show up when these issues are being talked about, the stuff that really angers people, the stuff that people really feel emotionally engaged in, then some of that TikTok, Instagram, fun, chippy-chappy chat stuff is going to start to grate, I think. It is worth saying, of course, that the early release scheme exists because over years, decades, we've hugely underinvested in our prison system. We haven't got the supply we need for the demand, for want of a better phrase, of people who the public judges want banged up. And what we've got now is a sort of prison system that doesn't work for anyone that's in there in terms of rehabilitation. Drug use now pretty much endemic across the prison estate. And it's going to be really difficult in a world where there isn't a lot of money to move money away from bridges, trains, the welfare budget, whatever it might be, to build prisons for people that we'd rather not have public money getting onto them. So it's difficult, lemon difficult, as was once said in the thick of it. But Andy Burnham needs an answer.
I wish I'd watched the thick of it more. I don't know any of these catchphrases. Nick says this is so obviously a result of decades of Tory mismanagement and austerity. Before you clap back, Grayling, Patel, Braverman pathetic. And he's got a point, which is that, as you say, it's decades of, the Tories increased sentencing in response to public opinion, but didn't build the prison places that were needed. But at the same time, how long can Labour get away with this? Because somebody else has said, Chris said, are there any new prisons currently being built? If so, when will they be completed? Because they talk about a building programme, but it doesn't seem to be happening.
So I think it's worth saying, over the next 5 years, by 2031, there'll be an additional 14,000 places coming into the prison estate. It does take, somewhat oddly, you would think, 7 years to build a prison in the United Kingdom, from it being decided to going through the inevitable planning rows to fighting the local government, etc. So it does take a while. There is a stat that I don't know necessarily we want to sort of use as a North Star for the UK because of the implications of it, but in the US they were building new prisons every 10 days in the 90s and early noughties in their sort of war on drugs. Now you look at the US now, and I think you can make a pretty compelling argument that expanding the prison population to that degree has not made that place a land of sort of peace and honey. But it does show that it is difficult to make quick decisions and get quick wins on issues that are as emotive as prisons and justice.
Absolutely. Well, let's move on to the front page story on the Times today. Ministers are drawing up plans to use a change in the fiscal rules to borrow an extra $9 billion a year to spend on infrastructure, housing and support for businesses. It's hoped the money will get the economy moving and give the Chancellor John Healey something positive to announce in his first budget. Let's talk to Linda Yu, an economist at Oxford University and London Business School, about whether this is fiscally responsible or not. Welcome to the show, Linda.
Hi, morning.
Thank you so much for joining us. What is your take? I mean, Jim O'Neill, who is the former Goldman Sachs banker who's worked for both Labour and Conservative governments, it seems to be the moving force behind this. This is the kind of borrowing, he says, that won't spook the markets. What's your view?
I think he's largely right, because that's actually why the fiscal rule was changed in the first place. And so we've had a couple of years to see whether or not markets would like a rule that basically says government can only borrow to invest. So you might recall, Ed, that previously the fiscal rules were around balancing the budget through, if you're going to increase spending, you have to raise taxes. By separating the two, which, by the way, isn't actually entirely new. This was Gordon Brown's golden rule back when. Then it would be different, because if you are borrowing to invest, for instance, in growth supporting measures, then you get a return several years down the line. Whereas the perception, certainly in markets, is day-to-day spending. So things, for instance, on social care, on health, that has to be paid for through taxes. Otherwise, the government is living beyond its means. But I would say that rule still exists, the day-to-day balancing of the current budget spending. So you can borrow, it looks like, about £9 billion under the borrowing to invest rule. But I think markets will still want to see the overall debt level of the UK, which is pretty high. It's about 100% of GDP, is still fiscally sustainable. So it's not an unlimited amount that government can borrow to invest. So $9 billion is probably about right.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's still, whichever way you cut it, it's still increasing your borrowing. I mean, to take it back to the sort of household analogy, if you go to the bank and get an overdraft because you're going to invest in something that's going to give you a financial return down the line, that's your decision and how you want to manage it. But the bank is still going to charge you interest, and you're still vulnerable to that. And that's the same here, isn't it?
Indeed. And actually, the third biggest category of government spending is actually debt interest payments. So it's around $100 billion a year. So if you look at one of the reasons why watching the markets is so important in this case is because a 1 percentage point increase in essentially the government's borrowing costs. So think of this as the rate of interest charged on government debt, what we call gilt yields. If that goes up by 1 percentage point, it increases debt interest payments by £12 billion. This is why the International Monetary Fund, the OECD, says that the UK, which has a disproportionately high amount of debt, which is linked anyways to inflation, could be disproportionately impacted by the war in the Middle East. So in other words, we can see it now. Growth is stagnating. Inflation has come down a bit, but it's still pretty high. What we have seen is borrowing costs go up. So if you know that that headroom, this is what we call the kind of room to meet the fiscal rules, is around 27 billion pounds from the last budget. Rapid changes around inflation, gilt yields, the war, that could easily be eroded, in which case it's not so easy to go to the creditors, the bond markets, and say, well, now we want to borrow billions more to invest, to grow. So I think it is still the overall picture that would matter.
And what kind of things were you looking at this from the perspective of a gilt trader, as it were? What kind of things would you want to see the government investing in using this £9 billion? What would reassure you? Would it be council housing? Would it be infrastructure like rail and roads? What kind of things can they use this money for?
So I think one of the things that markets, and actually the Office for Budget Responsibility, the independent fiscal body, tends to look for, are things like, does it increase the growth rate? So it's called what the OBR scores, which in and of itself is a whole other topic. So planning reform proposed by the previous Prime Minister's administration, that was estimated to raise growth by 0.2% over the course of the Parliament. Now that's pretty substantial, given that our growth rate is 1% now, hopefully rising to 1.5%, 1.7%. So planning to really free up, in that case, that was housing. But if you extend it to say, for instance, roads, rail, infrastructure, what that does is that it crowds in private investment. It makes businesses that want to invest say, oh, actually, we have better broadband, we have better transport, we have better housing. I could invest in all parts of the country. And I think that actually would be something that they're actually called bond vigilantes for some reason, because they watch this stuff so closely, would actually generate returns. Lower energy costs, that's another one. That's actually partly infrastructure as well. If you want to, for instance, invest in more renewables. So some of the vehicles are delivering this investment that have been mentioned, the National Wealth Fund, the business bank. These are all government agencies that, if they can show what they are investing in are what might be called shovel ready. So in other words, it's ready to go. You've reduced the planning, the uncertainty, and it will have a project life of, say, 3 to 5 years. I think those kinds of things would make markets go, okay, so as you can show you're delivering that, you can borrow more, because we want the economy to grow.
You smiled a bit when you mentioned the OBR, the Office for Budget Responsibility, and also the golden rule that Gordon Brown had. I mean, the trouble I have with all this is it seems to me that the golden rule and indeed the fiscal rules are sort of fictions created by governments to give the impression of fiscal rectitude, but never actually followed in practice.
Yeah, so that's actually why I smiled a bit, because part of the debate, certainly the academic debate, is whether or not any fiscal rules could bind a government, because governments can always change the rules. And one of my favorites has always been, you meet a rule over, say, a 3-year rolling basis, which is kind of the basis of the current fiscal rules. So it's constantly rolling forward.
Exactly.
And yeah, it's a bit. But I guess in today's global environment, where borrowing costs are high, borrowing levels are high across governments, not just in this country, having something which just provides a bit of a roadmap, a bit of a kind of guide, I think is more information is actually probably helpful. It doesn't mean that, and this is one of the, I think, real challenges of the budget, which is just because it looks like you might miss a fiscal rule, that's based on forecasts, which are pretty highly uncertain by the OBR, as well as any economic forecaster. The old joke is the sole function of economic forecasting is to make astrology look respectable. I mean, you shouldn't be changing public spending or raising taxes to meet something which is pretty uncertain. And that's why I think there is skepticism over it. But I would say we are disproportionately impacted by the war in the Middle East because of energy. Our energy costs are 7 times higher than the United States. So there are reasons why I think the UK having more rules at this point, so long as they're not, you don't overreact to them, it's not a bad thing. Anyways, the problem is we have these rules now, so if you remove it, the optics would not be good.
That's absolutely right. Linda, you, an economist at Oxford University and London Business School, thank you so much for coming on and talking about the government's plans to increase borrowing. I mean, I think this was telegraphed quite a lot as Andy Burnham marched to Downing Street. So in some ways, I suspect that they will get away with this, Andy.
Yeah, I think they probably will. But what we're heading into is now 2.5 months of slightly interminable budget speculation and expectation management. October 28th is the date, because obviously no grown-up country could possibly make any kind of fiscal policy change on a normal day when you decide you need to do it. We have to wait until a slightly strange Wednesday morning set piece that paralyses business for a couple of months. Linda was quite polite, I thought, about the OBR. Their forecasts over the past 10 years have been like asking a cat to go to a Michelin star restaurant. It's utterly pointless. They give you something, they'll eat it, but they have no conception of whether it's useful or not. And
I think that's quite cruel to cats.
Dogs? I don't know. Who's more discerning as an eater?
My dog is very discerning.
Okay. Yep. Separately. Linda's right. Look, the fiscal rules are a fiction. If they were actually a fundamentally useful way of running governments, bearing in mind we've had them for the last 20 years, we wouldn't be in the economic mess that we are in today, because we've always followed our fiscal rules. We've just changed them when it's convenient.
Yes, exactly.
Before my job at the Times, I used to edit a city newspaper. I was in the City of London for years. The bond markets the bond traders are interested in fiscal rules, of course. But what they're interested in is long-term planning and fiscal sustainability. And when they look at the UK, just as they look at most of the rest of Europe, and increasingly starting to look at the United States, what they see are ageing populations, rising day-to-day spending on things like welfare and health, and no growth obviously on its way to replace that, particularly in Europe. So sure, there might be a few extra billion in the fiscal rules, but these are rounding errors. If 9 billion was going to kickstart our economy, you'd hope that the other 130 billion we spent last year might have made an impact too, right? So look, infrastructure spending, good. Andy Burnham's government and the economic sustainability of the UK, and whether the bond markets continue to charge us more and more than the other European countries for our debt, is going to come down to whether there's a plan to bring down the welfare bill and to make health affordable before we become a country with a sort of health system attached.
Well said, Andy. Stick with us in a moment. We'll discuss Gatwick's plan to build a second runway, and Andy will tell me, if we have time, about his favourite pub. This is Ed Vaizey on Times Radio. Well, lots of feedback from listeners pointing out to Andy, for example, that the lemon whatever slogan he came up with was not from In the Loop. It was from the movie. It was not The Thick of It. It was from the movie spin-off In the Loop. That's the kind of accuracy we expect from our listeners. The cat and dog debate has well and truly started. Marcus says cats are Michelin, dogs are McDonald's. But on the actual subject of our economy, we've had a suggestion, I think from, I can't remember who from, about investing anonymously. Let's invest in reservoirs. So it's about investing in infrastructure, and let's talk about another piece of infrastructure that may actually finally happen, and this is Gatwick Airport's plan to build a second runway after campaigners lost a legal appeal against it. The expansion will allow for an extra 100,000 flights a year, and the airport claims it will provide £1 billion annual boost to the economy. I have to say, Andy, I cheered when I read this. I'm so fed up with the fact that we can't build anything in this country because it goes through the courts for 10 years with people coming up with more and more spurious excuses. We need airport capacity. I know I'm pro net zero, but we need it. I'm pleased that Gatwick has, in theory, got the go-ahead.
13 years since Gatwick first proposed building a second runway. And I think it's worth saying that we say build a second runway, and because we've seen all of the detail about Heathrow involving moving the M25 and tunnelling, and it all sounds very complex and difficult. Gatwick has a second runway. It has an emergency runway. To turn it into a functioning second runway involves moving some of the tarmac 12 metres north and servicing it with better taxiways. We are not talking about building the Hanging Gardens of Babylon here. We are talking about moving a long road with some specialised tarmac. And it's taken 13 years. So, yes, I ditto cheered. There's no question that London needs greater connectivity. There's no question that the UK needs greater connectivity. There are quite compelling arguments that building a second runway at Gatwick is a good thing, but is not the sort of transformative thing you need when you're thinking about hub connectivity, Heathrow, getting people in and out, etc. But nonetheless, more runways are a good thing. Here. It's a remarkable thing that it takes this long.
I can't get my head around that building this runway requires moving it 12 metres. Why can't they keep it where it is? Do you have any technical insight?
The short... I don't have any technical insight. What I've been told is that they just need to be a bit further apart, the two runways, to make it work properly. So it is already there. It's an emergency runway. To make it a fully functioning kind of day-to-day runway, it needs to be moved and serviced with infrastructure.
That's a technical insight.
That's
a very impressive technical insight about how if you've got two runways running at the same time,
you will have an aviation engineer in your
in your
WhatsApps in 30 seconds telling me I'm talking
this is
rubbish.
Absolute catnip to Times Radio listeners. We will now get 27 technical texts pointing out exactly why Gatwick needs to move its runway, or why Gatwick is potentially doing the wrong thing. But now let's get on to a much more important issue, which is the Times writing about their favourite London pubs. Times writers, London pubs, so we'll get a lot of texts about it only being London. But Andy, what inspired this crucial piece of journalism?
It's public interest journalism. Well, I am London editor, so I will...
You are the man who pretended to queue at pubs, even though you don't.
I did in a low-stakes debate with you, and then brought the whole edifice crashing down when I admitted I was doing it purely because someone had dropped out at the late notice. What it's on, as London editor at the Times, we do lots of lifestyle stuff. One thing that we kept getting asked was our favourite pubs and restaurants, so we decided to write it down. Related, it's the start of August, and less is going on in the world.
So there are two problems with the list. Speaking as a reader. First of all, you recommend the Devonshire, which nobody can get into.
I didn't recommend the Devonshire.
Nobody can get into it. It's like recommending the Ritz or something.
Which I'd happily recommend the Ritz. I've been. It's lovely. I'm surprised you're not on a... You've got a secret list, Ed.
And what about the Hawthorne in Shepherd's Bush, Giles Corran's favourite pub?
It's important to have a diversity of opinions. And Giles is welcome to his favourite pub, just as I'm welcome to recommend the Palm Tree in Mile End, which is a very different style of boozer, but nonetheless all part of London's rich tapestry of life.
In my headphones, we've now both got a strange echo. I've no idea whether this is coming through on the radio, but we've now got so much material for Times Radio listeners. Nobody's going to be able to do any work in the UK this morning because they've got to tell us whether cats or dogs are more discerning eaters. They've got to text in about their favourite London pubs, or indeed pubs outside London. And we need some very detailed technical texts about why Gatwick has to move its runway 12 metres. Andy Silvester, you've been, as always, a complete delight. Thank you so much for coming on to talk us through the morning's news. Just before 1, we'll be playing our quiz. Can you get to number 10? 10 questions for 10 jobs in my cabinet. If you climb all the way to the top of our greasy pole and become Prime Minister, you can win a branded digital radio. If you don't make it all the way and get the radio, you'll still get a personalised Can You Get to Number 10 cartoon drawn for us by the brilliant Sunday Times cartoonist Russell Hernman, and it'll be a collector's edition because this week I get to sign the cartoon, not Hugo. Yesterday, Mo from Greenwich got stuck on the question to become Foreign Secretary. What is the capital of Vietnam? Our potential new Foreign Secretary.
Vietnam, Ho Chi Minh City.
The production team have replaced the rather endearing Ed Miliband No 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 with the sound of me touching my toes, which is sort of disgusting. Mo, who it turns out I knew, and I finally worked out who she was about 30 seconds after we finished the contest. She got it wrong, sadly. The correct answer was Hanoi. Ho Chi Minh was the old Saigon. It's the second city of Vietnam. Hanoi, if you'd been shouting that, you would have become our Foreign Secretary. If you want to have a go and hopefully win a free digital radio, you can email me on studio@times.radio. You can start your message with the word Times and text 87222. You can send me a WhatsApp on 0333 003 2353. And what better incentive is there to get all 10 questions right than to avoid that terrible, terrible grunting sound you just heard? But now, without any grunting at all, let's get the news with Andy Hayes.